My name's Jeff Morgan. I am down in Burnet County in Texas, and we're in front of the courthouse here. And I'm here with Cindy. Cindy, you just came out of the courtroom just about an hour ago. Tell me what your thoughts were about what took place in the courtroom.
Well, it was just disappointing. I haven't seen my son or heard the sound of his voice, seen a picture of him, anything in about a year and a half now, and was just hoping to get some sort of, ordered visitation, access to my son, to see a picture of him. Anything would be more than what I've got now, and didn't really achieve much. Came out with one supervised visit, and after that it's pretty much his choice, my son's choice.
Right. I wasn't sure if it was one visit or two visits. Is it just one?
She was back and forth. I'm still a little confused, whether that's at least one, maybe two, if he wants it or something. I'm not sure. I'd have to see what they put in the orders, see the transcript to get the exact details.
Got it. So we are now talking about a family court situation. And one of the things that I understand, and you can correct me if my facts are wrong about this, but my understanding is that your ex-husband has withheld visitation or interfered with visitation over 110 times. Is that correct?
Correct. I mean, technically my son drives now. They've made it his choice, but they don't, there's no consequences or anything. It's his choice, and I haven't seen him for, I think you're right. They came up with a list, and it was hundreds of visits. 237 days, I think, is what it was.
Okay, but now you and your son, prior to all of this stuff taking place, you had a very strong relationship from what I understand. I've seen pictures on Facebook when you've been on the boats together and stuff like that. So is that correct? And if so, what happened after that? Do you have any idea?
We had a wonderful relationship. We did a lot of things together. A lot of parents, talked about how good of a relationship we had, even envied, how close we were. And he, one day, September 6th, he walked away, said, "I'll see you next week. I love you." And he never really came back other than to pick up his truck.
Wow. So you also lived on a houseboat, and that's pretty unusual. What was the backstory behind that?
We used to live in a condo there outside of Austin, Texas, and there was a marina down below, and there was several kids that lived on houseboats down there. There was a huge children's community. There was, a dozen people. Some were parents, and so it was just he was always down at the marina, and it came out that there was a boat that we could have bought, and he was very excited to do that, and so we moved from the condo into the houseboat, which was 2-bedroom, 2-bath. So it's it's not like it's small. It's bigger than a lot of people's apartments. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things that Judge Bayless said today, she said, you've been going through this for 7 years. Any child who's been subject to a lawsuit for 7 years of this lawsuit, it would be very tough on him. What is the background behind this lawsuit? Did you want a 7-year lawsuit, or has this been something that you've kind of had to do, or has been instigated against you?
No, I don't want any lawsuit. I would much rather just co-parent.
Right.
We co-parented fairly well up until when my son's father got remarried, and then it seemed to go downhill a lot more and more from there.
Yeah. So you talk about your ex-husband getting remarried. What I noticed, because I was sitting in the front row on the opposite side across from her, and she looked like she was smirking with some of the stuff that the judge said, and I thought the judge was very wrong. I got to speak with the judge a little bit afterwards. I told her I thought that she really misunderstood the situation. Of course, I don't know the whole thing, haven't seen everything, but from what I saw, she misunderstood it. But really, really, really bothered me was that the stepmom was there, and she seemed to be smirking about the whole thing. I think that's completely evil. Whenever you have a stepmother or a stepfather that is smirking about the natural bond being erased between a father and a child, or a mother and a child. So I don't know how much influence she had there, but it's probably something you don't want to speculate about. But
I have no idea. I mean, I have no insight into my child's life at all. All I get is a report card from school emailed to me occasionally. So, I mean, I have no idea what influence he's had, especially even when we were in contact, especially over there. We went through 5 years of therapy prior to all of this, and his story to the therapist was all very different But
my understanding was that throughout the years that he was with a therapist, he said that he wanted to either live with you or see you or something like that. Have I misunderstood that?
No, it's dozens upon dozens of times. I think it was 76 pages of therapy notes that he went to 2 different therapists over the course of 5 years. And throughout those notes, it's, my mom, my dad is bashing my mom, my crying, my dad's trying to remove my mom from my life. Several times, he would sit in the therapist's office and cry and even say, I can't repeat the words my dad says about my mom because it's too painful. And, there's nothing that come of that. The judge spoke to my son today, and I feel he's been alienated.
Right.
Sorry. Yeah. I feel he's been alienated from me because we have well-documented years and years and years of him making these outcries to his therapist, and all she cared about today was what he said today after he's already been alienated and swayed to believe and say those things about me.
Right, actually poison is what it's come down to. But throughout the years, has the judge never even taken into account any of the therapist's notes? Because if you have 5 years of this, you would think that a judge, the fact finder or whatever, they would say, wait a minute here, this is what you're telling me is completely different than what these notes are. So has the judge just not seen them or what?
We haven't been in her courtroom for 2017, so it's 5 years now. Yeah. So, yeah. I mean, she did hear a little bit of testimony from the first therapist. I initially actually won custody at that hearing. I had only lasted 3 months before opposing counsel filed, stuff to try and reverse that. But opposing side wanted a second opinion, which is why we ended up with 2 therapists on the case.
And both therapists concurred that their son wanted to live with you.
Exactly. Multiple times he said it. I mean, it's in their handwritten notes multiple times, very many times about, all the different details about how dad tries to poison me against my mom.
Yeah. So, parental alienation, like what you're talking about here, a couple of things. Number one, it needs to be recognized as domestic abuse. It is it is child abuse when that takes place. But the second thing that I've heard some of the experts talk about is when you deal with parental alienation, your intuition says this person is the bad parent. And what the guy said, Dr. Stephen Miller, one of the experts, he said the intuition will always lead you to the wrong conclusion, that it's like an upside down world. What you think is taking place, just the opposite is taking place. Do you find that in your case in particular here?
Most definitely, yes. It seems like it's a very hard thing to overcome, especially when a child gets to the point mine is.
Yeah.
Like the intervention should have happened during those 5 years when he made all those outcries, and it's almost just a lost cause now.
Yeah. So, and that really bothered me today, and I was visibly disagreeing with what she was saying when she was talking about you were the cause of this. You have done this. You have done that. And I thought, wait a minute here. The legal system, the quasi-legal system, the family court system, the anti-family court system, has been largely responsible for this, and they have not addressed the situation. I talked with her about the visitation issue, about, this is a state jail felony, and she kind of dismissed that and everything. And I was very, very, very upset. And I spoke with her afterwards, and I thought that she got it completely wrong. And I don't know how you felt, but to hear you, who just have said, I just want to see my child, I just want to hear his voice, being accused of being an abusive mother, that was incredible.
Well, I mean, studies have proved that even children that are physically and sexually abused, they still cling to their abuser. They still want a relationship. Right. Foster kids always want to go home. There's hundreds and hundreds of studies that show that, what is happening with my kid is 100% abnormal.
Right.
He won't come pick up Christmas gifts for 2 years. I don't even get a text message on Christmas Day with 2 words. Like, that's not a normal behavior of a child. That's somebody who has been poisoned and alienated to feel like they have to go to that extreme to please the other parent. And there's so many studies, and I don't know how to, make anybody here at least see that light.
Right. No, yeah, exactly. In fact, in a previous video that I did, or maybe it's forthcoming here, she does not, from my perspective, understand the issue of alienation at all, or maybe has a very superficial understanding. And again, if you have a superficial understanding, you always come to wrong conclusions. And when I saw what took place here, I thought that, from my perspective, that Judge Bayless, even though I had good things to say about her the first case, and I enjoyed the second case, in this last case, it was like her whole demeanor had changed. It was like she was angry and almost vitriolic towards you. And I just thought, what are you doing to accuse you of this? And, she talked about you not posting stuff on Facebook and not texting. Now, I have your text messages here. I think there's maybe 10 text messages and all that's kind of like I love you and stuff like that. I mean, this is considered abuse? I mean, this doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, I text my son once or twice a month. Hey, Christmas is coming up. I'd love to see you. Happy Thanksgiving. His birthday, vacations, just different things. I love you. I'd love to see you. I've got gifts here for you. I've never gotten a response. I have sent sometimes I would double up, send an email and a text message, because I never know if he's blocked. I don't know if his phone number's the same or if his email's the same. I don't know if he's getting them. But there's not even a response, for me to plea with my son to just, have lunch with me for an hour. It's been a year and a half. Yeah. And to just not even answer me, not even one word in a text message.
Right. And yeah, exactly. So you took a trip out of the country. How long were you gone?
I was back and forth, but I mean, for over total, it was about 6 months.
Was that just to get away from the situation, just to find some way to regain some sanity?
Yeah, very much so. My mother had passed away. Probably what it's been like a year and a half ago now, but and then the rejection of my son, just everything's a memory of the two of them, and you go from having a parent and a child to I don't have either. Yeah. And so I don't have any family to do Christmas or Thanksgiving with anymore. Yeah. So it's easier to get away from here than look at every place that reminds me of him every day.
Yeah, I've got it. Your mother passed away. How was the relationship between your mother and your son?
They were very close. We spent nearly every weekend down with her because she really enjoyed, it was real small. We were at Six Flags every weekend, or, the Thinkery, the museums and things. And then he got into racing these little RC cars. And our remote control, they're 8th scale remote control cars, and she loved doing that with him. She sponsored him. These little cars are $1,000, $1,500 a piece, and then you buy upgrades and you fix parts, and it's a very expensive hobby. And he had, I think we ended up with 5 cars because he could race, in every class that he, and she would go and she would sit there and be his pit boss and clean his tires and trade out tires. She knew how to do certain things on the cars, and she absolutely loved doing that with him. Mm-hmm. We did it every weekend he was with me. We were at the racetrack.
So after this whole thing happened, when he left you and then did not come back except to pick up his truck, did his relationship with your mom continue?
My mom was passed away.
Oh, at that point in time, she was already passed away. So,
well, I lost my mom first.
Okay, got it. Was he there at the funeral?
No. We spread her. She was cremated, and I spread her ashes, and he wouldn't even respond to come to that. No.
Oh, that's such a shame, because we don't talk about this a whole lot many times, but when one parent is erased, oftentimes the entire side of the family is erased. It can be grandparents, uncles and aunts, cousins. Sometimes the alienation is so bad that brothers and sisters get erased from each other. It's just terrible. So this is kind of a question that maybe I shouldn't ask, but you've been fighting this for 7 years. You didn't want to fight it, but you were fighting for your son. What is your opinion about the legal industry? Are they Do they thrive on conflict? Do they try to, I mean, why is even the legal industry involved to some degree? But what is your whole opinion about the legal industry?
I think it's very difficult. I think a lot of times the truth isn't ever really told.
So is perjury rewarded?
Yeah, basically, yes. I think there's room for improvement.
So with regard to the legislature, because really when it comes down to the Texas Family Code, those are statutes put into place by our legislature. To me, it seems very abusive and overreaching that we have legislators who know nothing about your family, who are putting things into place that help to destroy your family. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I don't know what laws, or I don't know what we could do different. So I don't know that I have suggestions at this point, but I think that, they definitely could use some education about things that actually happen in family law, and maybe the people making the laws just don't have close enough contact with the facts and what we go through and the issues, maybe.
Right. So I know that if, there are people that are talking, one person that's a friend of mine who's talking about a comprehensive family law reform package that if he gets elected, he will bring down here. I'm working with some other people too to put some reforms into place. But a lot of the family law really is abusive. And I wish, one of the things that I do wish would happen is that the legislators would have to go to a family court at least once a quarter to see the abuse that takes place. Many times I feel like you don't have any type of constitutional protections in here. Do you feel the same way?
I do. I mean, there can be violations of the Constitution, and what do you do when that happens? There's no recourse. There's no real boss or overseeing person that kind of makes sure that everything is done the way it's supposed to be. And
right. And back, if you go to Troxel versus Granville, and it's an opinion that I don't completely agree with, don't really like in some aspects, but they do talk about the presumption of the fit, willing, and able. Well, the fit parent, and basically the fit parent acts in behalf of the best interest of the child, whatever the best interest means, because nobody knows what that means. It's just a phrase that gets thrown out and that nobody ever details or defines or anything like that. But they also talked about that the fundamental rights of parents. This is one of the most sacred fundamental rights that we have in our society. And what I just saw in here was a judge basically telling you, sorry, Mom, you need to pay attention to your son. You need to not do this, not do that. I'm going to be super mom here. But wait a minute. This is a judge who doesn't know anything about your son really, except she spoke with him today. And that's about it. And here she is trying to tell you how to be a parent. And she knows nothing about the circumstances. She obviously knows nothing about the abuse that's taken place. And so do you feel like your rights or at least your relationship as a parent have just been completely erased by these courts?
I do. I mean, I haven't had any contact with my son at all in so long.
Yeah.
And for her to say, like, I don't have the right to know anything about him or contact him or have pictures, simply because that's now his choice.
Yeah.
And, there's no PhD, or psychologist or anybody that's educated in any way, about the situation that would think that this is a healthy situation. Like, a child refusing all absolute contact with the parent, there's clearly something wrong. It's not like, one of the examples that apparently my son gave the judge, that they then came to me, like this was one of the worst things they had, was that apparently I woke him up at 1:00 one night and wanted him to watch a movie with me. And I'm just thinking, okay, like the behavior of my son versus the reasons he's giving in no way, shape, or form match up. If that's not a clear sign that there's something else going on, I don't know what else is.
Yeah. So, I mean, to me, honestly, when I was a kid, if I would have had my parent wake me up at 1:00, hey, want to watch a movie with me, I'd be thrilled. Yeah.
I don't remember that instance. If it was late, it was probably a weekend and he was probably already awake, and I was trying to get him off of his PlayStation instead, watch a movie with me instead of playing your PlayStation.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, that's probably how it went down, if it even happened.
Yeah, and the recreation of memories does take place too. It's very easy to recreate memories of things that never existed. One of the things I hate seeing, though, is when you have a stepmom or a stepdad that basically becomes the imposter mom or the imposter dad. And, the bad mouthing that they can do against the real mom or the real dad. I don't know what this is going on here or not. I would have my suspicions. But looking at the smirk of that person in the courtroom today, I thought it was really, really bad. And my heart went out to you when she was, I thought to be honest with you, I thought the judge was facilitating abuse and actually participating in it in the way that she addressed you. I don't know if you want to address this or not, but I will give you an opportunity if you do.
No, I mean, it's
typical. It's typical anyway.
It's typical, and it is hard. I can't. No parent can imagine, the trauma that you go through in having a child removed from your life. I've told people it's almost easier, I think, if you lose them in an accident, because at least you bury them and move on, and you don't live day after day like. There's so many things in life I could do, but do I stay here, in this town where I have to see all these memories every day in hopes that maybe you'll come home someday? How many years do you put yourself through that before you move on?
So she said something that also bothered me, because she said, I know he'll come back. Is she a prophet? Does she have the knowledge of God? How do you know that? Because I know of cases where children have not come back 40 years later. That is a very arrogant thing for her to say. And again, I'm going to tell you, I don't know how much longer she has here, but I am very, very upset with this part of it. I think it was abuse. And I got to talk with her afterwards. And I told her that I would send her the videos and stuff like that. I just think what she did was abusive. And I'm so sorry. My heart went out to you. I wanted to stand up in the courtroom and say something, but I think that would have probably got me thrown out. So, anyway, do you have any, let me ask one other question, and maybe this is one you don't want to answer, but family law, sounds like family. It's like a nice, cozy place to get together. How much money have you spent?
Probably a couple $100,000, $250,000 maybe.
Yeah. And for the $250,000, you come up with this abuse that took place today.
I've been erased from my son's life.
Yeah. So, Cindy, are there any final words you want to say at all or not? To either the people that are going through this, because there are a lot of people going through this. It's a phenomenon that takes place. Whether you call it parental alienation, whether you call it obstruction of family bonding, whether you call it, poisoning a kid against a parent. There's a lot of things you could call it, but a lot of people have experienced it, and not just the parents. Oftentimes, families break down. And, a son who had a great relationship with his grandmother that was not even there for the spreading of her ashes, that is a pretty terrible thing to have happen. Anything you can tell these people that might be going through something similar?
Just find a support system, find people, there's groups out there where there's people going through what you're going through, and it's helpful to know. You're not the only one. It's helpful to have people that you can call and they instantly get it because they've been through it, where so much of the time the people on the outside, they don't understand. They see what's happening, and people can't understand, like, why won't the judge just listen to my son when he made outcries for, they started when he was in 4th grade and didn't stop. There was probably 7-8 years of outcries. It's easier when you're around those parents that are going through it, because it's hard to explain. A lot of outsiders that aren't going through it don't understand it. And
even if they think they do, they get it backwards, because the intuition part of it, what they think they see, it's just the opposite in many instances.
Yeah, the first thing people think is, you have to answer so many times in life. Like, you go to the grocery store or wherever, it's like you get to a point where you just hate going outside, because the second somebody asks about my son, it's emotional.
Right.
And here, you're crying in the grocery store. And it's just, it's a very hard thing to have to keep explaining to people. And when you meet new people, oh, do you have any children? Well, where do I go from there?
Right.
How do I answer that question with...
Right. No.
without, being upset all the time.
Yeah. So there's a couple of messages here that I think you wanted to say. First off, if you meet somebody in a situation like this, don't misjudge them. You're probably misjudging them. You're probably contributing to the abuse factor that goes on in their lives already. Listen to their stories. I've spoken with so many people, when I've spoken in groups and stuff like that, and then you hear people that are like, this has happened to me, this has happened to me. There's the wall of shame almost over top of you, and people are afraid to talk about it. But once they hear somebody talking about it, they can relate to you. But those who are on the outside, they come to a very judgmental conclusion that may be just the opposite of the facts. And so if you're in that position, if you have somebody who's talking to you about this, don't judge them. There's a difference between alienation and estrangement. Alienation is when something is taking place and it's the kid's being poisoned. You would not accept us feeding poison to kids, but you accept a father or a mother feeding poison to a kid about his or her other parent. That is horrendous. And not just a parent, sometimes grandparents do it, sometimes the stepmom, the stepdad does it as well. But the second thing is, if you're a child who's been alienated, you need to be able to reach out to your parents. You see that your parents, even though you've done some pretty awful things, and parents are so willing to say, come on back, we love you. I mean, I think about the story of the prodigal son in the New Testament. The son's like, Father, give me my inheritance, I'm going to go off. And then he goes off to another country, he wastes it all. He spends it on his friends and drinking rounds and prostitutes and everything else. And then he gets broke, and all of his friends abandon him. And he's like, oh, you know what, my father's servants have more than I do. Maybe I'll go back and ask to be treated as a servant. And it says that when his father used to wait every day looking for him. Just what you're talking about. Is he going to come back? Is he going to come back? And he sees him from a distance, and he went running out to see him. Children, if you're one of these people, go to your parents. They will come running to see you. They love you, want to embrace you, want to tell you how much they love you. And if you have children or something like that as well, children that have children, like your grandchildren, bring your grandchildren too. Because the parents that you've been alienated from, whether you've alienated yourself or that you walked away or somebody's done this to you, you're still their flesh and blood. There is a relationship there that cannot be changed. And, come back, make the steps to come back. And for these family courts, I'd like to just say that they get it wrong so often. A lot of these attorneys I've watched, like there's one attorney says, well, I've gone to this alienation seminar, and they have no idea what they're talking about, but they hear the word alienation, it becomes a new buzzword. But they are part of the problem. And sometimes the judges, they need to be able to look at everything. I don't even know that the judges should be involved in a lot of this stuff because they get it wrong so much. Most of the time with family court, I just assume that it's wrong because that's been my experience. But anyway, Cindy, our hearts go out to you still. Of course, we wish for the best, but the reality is, if you're out there saying, well, he's going to come back around, do you have a guarantee? You don't want to put money on that? Give us a time frame. Because that is just a cliche, a triteism that you're trying to say, and you aren't listening to what's really going on here. But we do hope that he comes back at the same time, and we hope that maybe this Judge Bayless will see the errors of her ways and maybe come back and do something to rectify the situation. I know you've been fighting, but not in this malicious way that they're saying. I love you, hope to see you at Christmas, love to have a picture. It is crazy. But anyway, Cindy, thank you so much. Wish you all the best going forward. Any other final words?
No, just thank you for what you do, your time.
Well, thank you too. Anyway, we'll talk with you again later. Thanks so much, Cindy.